The paradox of feeling lost. You're not lost, but it sure feels like you are. And that feeling, that low, unsettled feeling you can't quite name, like something isn't right anymore, is hard to explain to anyone who hasn't been here. Because from the outside, nothing looks broken. Your life might still be moving. You might still be showing up, still functioning, still doing what you're supposed to do. But inside, it's different. It's like you're living in a familiar room, and suddenly the air feels thinner. The furniture is the same, the walls are the same, but the atmosphere has changed, and you can't unfeel it. The plans that used to make perfect sense don't pull you forward now. Not because they failed, not because you failed, but because something inside you stopped resonating with them. It's like your soul quietly withdrew its vote, and that's the part that disorients you the most. Because you're used to pushing, you're used to effort, you're used to having a reason, a goal, a direction you can name. But now, the same goals don't light you up. The same milestones don't feel like they matter. The future you were once so sure about now feels far away, blurred, like a memory you can't emotionally reach anymore. And that can be scary, because certainty is one of the mind's favorite addictions. Even familiar paths start to feel strangely empty. Routes you've walked 100 times don't guide you anymore, only echo back at you. And even when nothing is technically wrong, even when your life looks fine on the outside, something still feels off underneath. It's not always sadness. Sometimes it's numbness. Sometimes it's restlessness. Sometimes it's that subtle heaviness in your chest that shows up when you imagine your old future. Here's the paradox most people never understand. When you're being guided the most, you often feel the most disoriented, because guidance doesn't always feel like a clear sign. Sometimes it feels like a door closing without explanation. Sometimes it feels like the floor shifting. Sometimes it feels like, I don't know who I am in this chapter. When you're closest to a breakthrough, the old map stops working. And when you begin aligning with a higher version of yourself, the timeline you've been walking on quietly dissolves beneath your feet. You're not failing at life. You're not falling behind. You're standing between timelines. And yes, that space feels unfamiliar. But unfamiliar doesn't mean wrong. Unfamiliar can mean new. What it feels like to be between timelines. Let's be real. Being between timelines doesn't feel mystical at first. It doesn't feel inspiring. It doesn't feel like enlightenment. It feels confusing because you're used to measuring your life by progress, by outcomes, by motion. So when motion slows, when certainty fades, your mind calls it failure. But it isn't failure. It's transition. You wake up not knowing where you're going, not just in a practical sense, but internally. And that's the unsettling part. It's not that your calendar is unclear. It's that your identity is unclear. You feel disconnected from the goals that used to give your life structure and meaning. Dreams you worked hard for suddenly feel empty. And it's a weird emptiness because it doesn't feel like laziness. It doesn't feel like giving up. It feels like your inner compass is refusing to point toward directions that no longer belong to you. You outgrow old versions of yourself, old routines, old identities, but nothing fully new has arrived to replace them yet. So you're living inside an unfinished sentence. You might feel unmotivated, but also restless, tired, but unable to rest, pulled forward, but unable to see what's ahead. And your body knows Something is happening, but your mind doesn't have words for it yet. So you try to translate it into language the mind understands. What's my next step? What's my purpose? What am I doing with my life? But this isn't a problem of planning. It's a problem of frequency. Your energy has shifted, and your reality hasn't caught up yet. And this is where the mind starts to panic. It starts searching for explanations. It says, "You're behind. You made the wrong choices. Everyone else knows where they're going. Why don't you?" It compares. It judges. It tries to force clarity in a place where clarity isn't available yet. And the more it tries, the tighter you feel. Because clarity can't be forced in a timeline gap. A timeline gap is where you're being recoded. But the space you're standing in, this strange quiet in between, it isn't a mistake. It isn't a wrong turn. It's a threshold, a passage, a doorway. And doorways are uncomfortable because they ask you to leave one world before you've fully entered the next. Why the old path doesn't fit anymore. At some point in growth, the old timeline starts to feel too small. Not because it was wrong, not because it wasted your time, but because you've expanded beyond it. An expansion always makes the old shape uncomfortable. Think of a snake shedding its skin. That skin once protected it. It once fit perfectly. It once allowed growth. But eventually, staying inside it would mean suffocating. That's what misalignment feels like. Not dramatic, not always obvious, just tight. Like you can't breathe in your own life anymore. Your discomfort isn't proof something is broken. It's a signal that something no longer matches who you're becoming. And the most painful mistake people make here is trying to crawl back into a version of life that already ended. You weren't born to force yourself back into an old identity just because it's familiar. Because familiarity is not the same as destiny. And sometimes your mind will call it stability when it's actually just a cage you've decorated. The soul doesn't evolve in a straight line. It moves in cycles, through collapse and expansion, through quantum leaps. Before every leap, there's a pause, a disorientation, a weightless moment where nothing feels anchored. This is that moment. And here's the truth. If you're in that pause, it means a leap is being prepared, timelines, and identity. Here's a deeper truth. Most people were never taught. You don't move through life just once. You move through different versions of life. A timeline isn't defined by external events. It's shaped by your internal identity. Each one reflects what you believe you deserve, what you tolerate, what you expect, what you're willing to receive. So when your beliefs upgrade, your timeline has to upgrade too. And that upgrade often begins as discomfort. When your inner identity shifts faster than your outer reality, it feels like you're floating between worlds. Psychologically, it's identity reorganization. Your nervous system loosening its grip on the old self. Because the nervous system is loyal to the familiar, even if the familiar hurts, even if the familiar is small. So when you start becoming someone bigger, your body can react like something is wrong, when what's actually happening is you're expanding beyond what you're used to. Spiritually, it's an energetic upgrade, a recalibration of your frequency, meaning you can't keep living in the same emotional patterns, the same energetic agreements, the same self-concept, and expect a different reality. Philosophically, it's the death of who you thought you were before the birth of who you truly are. Carl Jung called this individuation, the painful but necessary collapse of the false self, so the real self can emerge. And that collapse can feel like losing direction because the false self was built out of directions, out of should, out of approval, out of survival. So when that fades, you're left with something raw, you. But the mind hates the unknown. It needs labels, it needs certainty, it needs control. So it labels this sacred transition as being lost between crossroads. The pause that creates the new you. You imagine you're standing at a major crossroads in your life. Behind you is a path you know by heart. You remember every turn, every rule, every expectation you've carried. Ahead of you are paths that don't have clear shape yet. They're real, but it's not time for them to fully reveal themselves. And in that moment, you feel like you're nowhere. You can't move forward. You don't want to go back. You feel suspended. But don't mistake this for stagnation. This is a deliberate pause, almost like the universe hitting hold on purpose. Because sometimes the most compassionate thing life can do is slow you down until your soul catches up to your body. It's like the tiny gap between an exhale and an inhale. Like the moon shifting between phases, no longer full, not yet new, or even more accurately, the silence between musical notes. Without that silence, the entire song turns into noise. And if fear makes you rush out of this space, you'll miss the quiet transformation happening inside it. Sometimes, doing nothing and letting yourself float is exactly when your soul is doing the most work, preparing the next version of you. Because the next version of you isn't built through forcing. It's built through integration, through stillness, through honesty, through listening. Why the fog shows up right before the shift. There's a truth we usually miss when we're facing uncertainty. Before life moves you into a brighter chapter, it often takes away your certainty first. Why? Because certainty belongs to the old you, to the mindset and habits that got you here, but won't get you where you're going next. If you could see the road ahead clearly right now, you'd walk it with the same old fears, the same old reflexes, the same old identity. But the next level of life requires a whole new operating system, a steadier nervous system, a stronger self-concept, a deeper relationship with trust instead of control. So clarity disappears, not to punish you, but to rebuild you from the inside out. That's why trying to force answers right now only creates anxiety. You're using yesterday's questions to search for tomorrow's reality. Instead of demanding certainty, let yourself be a little unclear. Let the fog be there, because inside that fog, the new you is forming. And when you're ready, clarity won't arrive like a loud announcement. It'll arrive like a quiet knowing. The most common mistake in this phase. Most people panic here. They rush to fill the silence. They cling to old goals, old relationships, old labels. They mistake discomfort for danger. And they retreat, even when what they're retreating to doesn't fit anymore. But real growth doesn't come from turning back. It comes from learning how to stay present inside uncertainty without collapsing, without numbing, without forcing, without abandoning yourself. That's mastery, because the person you become here is the person who can hold the next timeline. The river and the current. Think of your life like a river. There are times we exhaust ourselves trying to swim upstream, trying to control everything with sheer force. But if you let go in a careless way, you can end up drifting without direction. The real wisdom is learning the current, feeling its rhythm, trusting its intelligence. When you stop fighting the water and start moving with it, everything gets lighter. And here's what people don't realize. The river has always been moving you, even your delays, even your detours, even your endings. So if you feel like you're floating between the old and the new right now, don't punish yourself for not moving. You're not stuck. You're recalibrating. You're learning a new rhythm, a new pace, a new kind of power. Be patient with yourself. You're not standing still. You're preparing to move with a deeper current. Signs you're actually aligning. Here's how you know. This isn't failure. You feel called to slow down. Old desires don't excite you anymore. You crave depth, not distraction. You're more sensitive to energy. You're pulled toward honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. These aren't signs of chaos. They're signs of an upgrade. Your nervous system is recalibrating. Your values are reorganizing. Your soul is renegotiating its relationship with reality. And yes, that can feel like instability, but it's not instability. It's re-anchoring. Transformation. When you live this, when you stop calling yourself lost and start honoring this threshold, your energy changes. You stop grasping. You stop proving. You stop chasing timelines that don't want you anymore. And life responds. The right people begin to recognize you. Opportunities show up that match who you've become. Choices feel lighter, clearer, more natural. The fog doesn't lift all at once. It thins. And one day, without knowing exactly when it happened, you're walking a new path. Not because you forced it, because you became ready for it. Because you stopped trying to drag the future towards you and started letting yourself rise to meet it. And if these words found you at the right time, if something inside you feels seen or steadied, like this video, subscribe, not for the algorithm, but for your own alignment. Because messages like this don't arrive randomly. They arrive when you are ready to trust what's unfolding.